On January 23, 1960, two men sealed themselves inside a steel sphere barely large enough to stand up in and began falling toward a point on Earth that no human being had ever reached, a target so extreme that many engineers at the time privately doubted any vessel could survive the trip at all. Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh were riding a bathyscaphe called the Trieste, designed by Piccard's father, the Swiss oceanographer Auguste Piccard, and their destination was a place at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean called Challenger Deep, the deepest known point in all of Earth's oceans. For nearly 5 hours, they sank through total darkness, watching the pressure gauges climb toward numbers that had never been tested on a manned vessel before. Partway down, they heard a loud crack. A window in the outer hull had fractured under the strain. They kept going anyway. When they finally touched bottom, nearly 36,000 feet below the surface, the pressure outside their tiny sphere was roughly 1,000 times what you feel standing on dry land, enough force to turn an unprotected human body into little more than pulp within a fraction of a second. They spent only 20 minutes down there, unable to take a single usable photograph because the cracked window had kicked up too much sediment, and then they began the long climb back to the surface. That single dive happened 9 years before Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, and there is a popular myth that more people have walked on the lunar surface than have ever reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's not actually true. 24 humans have flown to the moon, and at least 27 have made it all the way down to Challenger Deep, most of them adventurous explorers rather than career scientists. But the myth persists for a reason. This place is so extreme, so hostile, and so poorly mapped that it might as well be another planet. And here's the part that should really unsettle you. As brutal as the Mariana Trench is, it isn't even the deepest hole humans have ever managed to reach, not by a long shot. There's a place in northern Russia where scientists dug more than 7 miles straight down into solid rock. Hit conditions so hostile they had to stop, and left behind a story so strange that people still believe, to this day, that they drilled into hell itself. If stories like this genuinely fascinate you, stick around, because we're about to descend through every layer of Earth's most extreme, least explored places, from the crushing dark of the deep Pacific to a hole drilled straight into the planet's ancient crust. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why humanity has mapped more of the moon's surface than the bottom of its own oceans. Let's start with the trench itself. The Mariana Trench sits in the western Pacific Ocean, and at its widest point it stretches as wide as roughly 20 national malls laid end to end in Washington, D.C. Its full length is nearly a fifth of the diameter of the entire Earth. The trench was first identified back in 1875 by the crew of the British survey ship HMS Challenger, using nothing more than a weighted rope lowered over the side, and it took nearly 8 more decades before a single human being actually went down to see it firsthand. Explorers who have made the descent describe Challenger Deep as chilly, silent, and strangely peaceful, a place where beams of light catch bright blankets of red and yellow rocky outcrops scattered across the seafloor, and where small, translucent, almost ghost-like creatures drift through water that has never once seen sunlight. Because sunlight simply cannot penetrate that far down, the entire trench, from top to bottom, exists in absolute darkness. The temperature hovers just a couple of degrees above the freezing point of salt water, kept from turning into a solid block of ice only because salt lowers water's freezing point slightly, combined with faint geothermal heat rising from the ocean floor itself. And then there's the pressure, the real reason so few humans have ever gone down there. At the very bottom of the trench, the water pressure is roughly 1,000 times greater than what we experience at sea level, equivalent to the weight of about 50 fully loaded jumbo jets pressing down on your body all at once. Despite all of that, life has found a way to survive against every apparent odd. Researchers exploring the trench have encountered eel-like fish, snailfish, and spoonworms living at extraordinary depths, alongside strange translucent sea cucumbers and shrimp-like amphipods. One of the biggest surprises has been the discovery of thriving microbial mats that feed directly on methane and hydrogen, seeping up from the mud, an entire ecosystem running on chemistry instead of sunlight, thriving in conditions that would kill almost any surface organism within minutes. Among the most remarkable residents is the Mariana snailfish, a small, fragile-looking creature that has evolved to withstand crushing pressure other fish simply cannot survive, letting it feed far deeper into the trench than almost any of its competitors. Strangely, many of the creatures that live at these extreme depths grow noticeably larger than their shallow water relatives, a phenomenon scientists call deep-sea gigantism. The giant tube worm, for instance, can grow up to 6 feet long, and researchers still don't have a fully settled explanation for why. One leading theory points to the extra oxygen dissolved in the frigid, deep water, letting these creatures' bodies grow larger and more efficiently than they could in warmer, shallower conditions. Given how extreme this environment is, it should come as no surprise that we've barely scratched the surface of exploring it. After that first descent in 1960, more than 50 years passed before anyone went back down, a gap so long that an entire generation of oceanographers grew up believing the feat would never be repeated. It wasn't until 2012 that filmmaker James Cameron, famous for directing Titanic and Avatar, piloted a specially built vertical submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger Solo to the bottom of Challenger Deep, becoming only the third person in history to make the trip and the first to do it alone, though the pressure damaged some of the sub's thrusters and its sonar system along the way, forcing him to navigate the final stretch with limited instrumentation. He spent roughly 3 hours at the bottom before ascending, describing the experience as one of the most desolate alien environments he had ever encountered, more remote in some ways than the lunar surface itself. Because so few people have ever gone that deep, there still isn't a complete, detailed map of the very deepest point on our planet. In fact, we've mapped a smaller percentage of Earth's oceans than we have of the surface of Mars. Scientists estimate that only around 5% of the world's oceans have been mapped in any real detail, even though water covers roughly 2/3 of Earth's surface. More recent surveys and satellite technology have pushed that figure only modestly higher in the years since, and researchers now estimate that a little over 20% of the seafloor has been mapped with reasonably high-resolution sonar, still leaving the vast majority of the ocean floor essentially unknown territory. The ocean isn't the only enormous blank spot left on our maps. The Amazon rainforest remains one of the most unexplored regions on land, and the reasons read like a horror movie checklist. Jaguars, anacondas, piranhas, black caimans, and Brazilian wandering spiders all pose genuine danger to anyone attempting to study the region up close, and relentless year-round rainfall triggers frequent flooding along with treacherous, unpredictable river currents. Within just one stretch of Brazil near the Peruvian border, researchers believe at least 14 tribes still live with no contact whatsoever with the outside world, and national authorities have deliberately chosen to keep it that way, believing isolation offers these communities their best chance at protecting their future. A similar situation exists on a remote island in the Indian Ocean. After the devastating tsunami of December 2004, helicopters flew over North Sentinel Island simply to check whether its inhabitants had survived. The Sentinelese people were not exactly welcoming. They responded by firing arrows at the aircraft to drive the unwanted visitors away. This tribe remains one of the last genuinely uncontacted peoples on Earth, and although anthropologists and filmmakers did visit the island briefly in the late 1960s, we still know remarkably little about its population today. North Sentinel sits far off established shipping lanes in the Bay of Bengal, has no natural harbor, and is ringed by a shallow reef that makes approach by anything but a small boat extremely difficult. Indian authorities have banned outsiders from visiting the island entirely, citing safety concerns for both visitors and the islanders themselves, and estimates of the population range wildly, anywhere from as few as 15 to as many as 500 people. Linguists believe the Sentinelese are distantly related to other indigenous groups scattered across the Andaman Islands, yet their closest geographic neighbors reportedly cannot understand a single word of their language, suggesting a truly extraordinary length of isolation. Even entire continents remain largely unexplored. Antarctica has no permanent human residents at all, only rotating groups of international scientists who live there temporarily, and despite satellite imagery mapping the whole continent from above, more than 99% of its surface still lies buried beneath a permanent ice sheet that in places runs 1 to 3 miles thick, roughly half the height of Mount Everest, making it the coldest, windiest, and driest continent on Earth, conditions that render most of its interior essentially unlivable and unstudied even today. In the Himalayas, meanwhile, sits Gangkhar Puensum, the tallest unclimbed mountain on the planet, located in Bhutan. Its name translates roughly to White Peak of the Three Spiritual Brothers, and out of respect for local spiritual beliefs, Bhutanese authorities banned mountaineering there entirely at the start of the 21st century. To this day, no climber has ever officially reached its summit. Now let's head back underwater, because some of Earth's most fascinating unexplored places aren't hidden in remote jungles or icy wastelands. They're hiding in plain sight, submerged just off the coast, swallowed by rising seas centuries ago, sometimes millennia ago, long before recorded history had any name for the civilizations that built them. Off the coast of Italy sits the sunken resort city of Baiae, once nicknamed the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, a place where Rome's wealthiest elite traveled for leisure, luxury, and open-air spas built over natural volcanic hot springs. Today, scuba divers can swim among remarkably preserved Roman sculptures, crumbled temples, and the marble floors of ancient villas, all sitting quietly on the seafloor after centuries of rising water slowly claimed the city following its abandonment around the 8th century. Even further back in time sits Pavlopetri, off the coast of Greece in the Peloponnese, discovered by British oceanographer Nicholas Fleming, who spotted geometric patterns on the seabed while free diving on vacation. Researchers later confirmed the site dates back roughly 5,500 years to the Bronze Age, complete with stone buildings, streets, a marketplace, and public squares, making it the oldest submerged town ever documented anywhere in the world. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island sits an equally mysterious formation nicknamed Japan's Atlantis. a massive underwater structure roughly the size of 5 football fields, featuring stepped terraces, sharp angular edges, and what some researchers insist are clear signs of deliberate human construction dating back possibly 10,000 years. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has personally dived the site more than 100 times and remains convinced it's the remnant of a lost civilization, pointing to features like a carved turtle and a triangular pool he believes once served as a water fountain. Other scientists strongly disagree, arguing the entire formation is a natural result of thousands of years of erosion acting on a single massive rock formation, comparable to Ireland's naturally occurring Giant's Causeway. In the Caribbean, the sunken city of Port Royal, Jamaica, tells an even more violent story of a city undone in a single catastrophic morning. In 1692, this wealthy, pirate-frequented trading hub, then one of the richest cities in the Western Hemisphere, was struck by a massive earthquake, estimated today at roughly 7.5 in magnitude, that liquefied the sandy ground beneath the city and swallowed roughly 33 acres of it whole, followed by waves as tall as 10-story buildings. Remarkably, much of the 17th century city survives in good condition under around 40 feet of water today, complete with taverns, kitchens, and a submerged bridge that divers still explore. And off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Khambat, sonar surveys conducted in 2001 revealed well-defined geometric shapes stretching across a roughly 5-kilometer stretch of seafloor with recovered debris, including pottery, beads, and construction material, dated to more than 9,500 years old, meaning that if the site is confirmed as an authentic human settlement, it would represent the oldest known civilization anywhere on Earth. So why, with all our modern technology, have we explored so little of our own planet? The answer largely comes down to cost, danger, and sheer scale. Believe it or not, over 80% of the world's oceans remain uncharted in any meaningful detail, and only around 7% carry any kind of formal marine protected status. Scientists increasingly rely on satellite technology to track ocean color and monitor phytoplankton, the microscopic organisms that form the base of the entire marine food chain, feeding everything from tiny zooplankton up to the largest whales on the planet. These satellites can gather in a matter of days data that would once have taken a research ship a full decade to collect through direct measurement. But satellites alone can't replace physically diving into the depths. Modern ocean exploration increasingly relies on autonomous floats and drifters that ride ocean currents while collecting data, alongside a growing fleet of manned, remote-controlled, and fully autonomous underwater vehicles. These combined efforts have led to genuinely exciting discoveries, including a deep-sea coral reef near Morocco, the only one of its kind still actively growing in the Mediterranean Sea, along with entirely new species that were previously thought to exist only in the Atlantic Ocean. Findings like these have convinced local governments to formally designate new marine protected areas, part of a broader international push known as the 30 by 30 initiative, which aims to protect 30% of the world's oceans by the year 2030. It's an ambitious target, and there's still a long road ahead, but every new expedition adds evidence that makes the case for protection that much harder for authorities to ignore. Some of the most astonishing recent discoveries haven't come from the open ocean at all, but from inside the ocean floor itself, in a place scientists never expected to find anything alive whatsoever. Scientists have recently identified a vast, largely hidden ecosystem living inside microscopic cracks within the basalt rock that makes up the majority of Earth's oceanic crust. These microbes don't rely on sunlight or organic material drifting down from the surface. Instead, they survive entirely through chemical reactions between rock and seawater, a process scientists call chemosynthesis. Researchers now believe over half of Earth's entire surface consists of oceanic crust, averaging roughly 4 miles thick, meaning this hidden chemical ecosystem could plausibly be one of the most extensive habitats for life anywhere on the planet. The clues had been building since the 1990s, when scientists first noticed strange microscopic holes bored into basalt rock that looked suspiciously like the work of living organisms, despite the conventional wisdom insisting nothing could survive there. Researchers eventually confirmed these microbes thrive at the energy-rich centers of oceanic plates before that chemical fuel runs out closer to the plate edges. Samples drilled from a plate roughly 120 miles off the coast of Washington state later confirmed the organisms run almost entirely on hydrogen, using it to convert carbon dioxide into organic matter, which in turn feeds other microorganisms further down the chain. Researchers doubt any complex multicellular life could survive in conditions this hot and energy poor, but the discovery itself has reshaped how scientists think about where life might be able to exist, both here on Earth and potentially on other worlds entirely. NASA has taken particular interest in this line of research precisely because it offers clues about what alien oceans, hidden beneath the icy crusts of distant moons, might actually look like. The deeper you go, the stranger the wildlife gets, and Earth's abyssal zones, generally defined as anything below about 3,300 feet, are home to some of the most bizarre creatures ever documented. The extreme cold and near total absence of food at these depths has produced a phenomenon scientists call deep sea gigantism, where certain invertebrates grow dramatically larger than their shallow water cousins. Researchers have documented sea sponges as large as a minivan, and a colossal squid found in sub-Antarctic waters that measures nearly 14 times the length of the more common squid species found off New Zealand. In 2021, researchers photographed a giant phantom jellyfish at a depth of roughly 3,200 feet, trailing tentacles measuring 33 feet long, a creature capable of diving to depths beyond 21,900 feet, despite the apparent scarcity of food that far down. The largest giant squid ever documented measured 43 feet long and weighed nearly a ton. And because there's no sunlight and therefore no plant life to sustain a food chain in the abyssal zone, most deep-sea creatures survive by scavenging what scientists call marine snow, tiny organic particles drifting down from the surface far above. A giant squid, remarkably, needs only about 1 ounce of fish per day, roughly 45 calories, meaning a single catch can sustain it for days. Greenland sharks, found at depths of up to 7,200 feet, take that survival strategy even further. They grow only about 0.4 inches per year, rarely exceed 20 feet in length, and can live for up to 400 years, making them among the longest-lived vertebrates on the planet, sustained by an extraordinarily slow metabolism, perfectly suited to an environment where meals are scarce and energy conservation is everything. Now, here's where the story gets genuinely stranger, because the Mariana Trench, brutal as it is, isn't actually the deepest hole humans have ever managed to reach. That title belongs to a narrow borehole drilled into solid rock in the Kola Peninsula of northwestern Russia. And its story reads like something out of a horror film, even though nearly all of it is grounded in real, documented science. Starting in May 1970, Soviet scientists began drilling straight down into the Earth's crust with a single audacious goal: reach as deep as technically possible, originally targeting a depth of roughly 9 miles. For the first several years, the drill cut steadily through hard granite. Then it hit softer rock, and the shaft itself began to crumble under its own weight, forcing engineers to redirect the drill path entirely, resulting in a borehole that, viewed as a whole, resembles a tree trunk branching into multiple separate chutes rather than one straight line. By 1979, the Kola borehole had broken the world depth record. By 1989, after nearly 2 decades of grinding progress, it reached its final depth of 12,262 meters, just over 40,000 feet, or roughly 7.5 miles straight down, making it, to this day, the deepest artificial point ever reached anywhere on Earth. At that depth, scientists encountered rock temperatures of around 180 degrees Celsius, or 356 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly double what engineers had originally predicted, hot enough to make the surrounding rock behave almost like putty, oozing back into the borehole nearly as fast as the drill could remove it. Drilling officially stopped in 1992, not because scientists found anything supernatural down there, but because the equipment simply couldn't function reliably under those conditions. That hasn't stopped one persistent urban legend from spreading for decades. According to a story that reportedly originated from a Finnish tabloid published as an April Fool's joke, workers supposedly lowered a microphone into the hole and recorded the sounds of tortured human screaming rising up from the depths, and a strange horned creature allegedly leapt from the borehole before fleeing into the darkness. It's entirely fictional, but the myth still circulates online today as the so-called well to hell. What the Kola borehole actually uncovered was, in its own way, just as astonishing as any myth. At around 3.7 miles down, in rock estimated to be roughly 2.5 to 2.8 billion years old, scientists recovered fossilized microscopic plankton, among the oldest fossilized life forms ever documented anywhere on the planet, pushing back scientific estimates for when life first appeared on Earth by roughly 1.5 billion years. Researchers also discovered that soil recovered from around 2 miles down almost perfectly matched the mineral composition of samples collected from the surface of the moon, lending further support to the leading scientific theory that the moon formed from debris ejected when a massive ancient impact tore a chunk directly out of early Earth. Large quantities of hydrogen gas, along with helium, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide, bubbled steadily up from deep within the borehole throughout the drilling project, and researchers even found trace deposits of gold, working out to roughly 2.5 ounces of gold for every ton of rock brought to the surface. Engineers originally hoped to keep pushing toward the Earth's mantle, which would have required drilling to a depth of around 44 miles, a target that, at their achieved drilling pace of roughly 200 feet per month, would have taken close to 80 years of uninterrupted work, even under ideal conditions. The project was ultimately abandoned in the 1990s as Soviet funding collapsed following the fall of the USSR. And today, the site sits largely in ruins, though tourists still occasionally visit, drawn partly by the very same myths the scientists themselves never actually encountered. Even that isn't the full story of what lies beneath our feet. More recent research has identified an enormous body of water trapped as deep as 370 miles underground, locked inside a crystalline mineral structure under such extreme pressure that it cannot boil away despite temperatures reaching roughly 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Remarkably, scientists estimate this hidden underground ocean may contain several times more water than every ocean, sea and river combined on Earth's surface, a discovery that has reshaped how geologists think about the planet's total water budget, and that likely formed during Earth's earliest, most violent stages, when the young planet was still a chaotic mix of molten rock and debris left over from its formation. Separately, scientists drilling into the ice sheet in Antarctica discovered an enormous hidden lake, comparable in scale to Lake Ontario, buried beneath ice believed to be at least 20,000 years old, with water that has apparently remained completely isolated from the outside world for roughly 15 million years. When researchers pulled up ice samples from deep below the surface, they discovered an unknown strain of bacteria whose genetic code matched only around 86% with any previously known organism, a difference significant enough that scientists still debate exactly how novel this life form truly is. These bacteria thrive in near-freezing water rich in oxygen and carbon dioxide, conditions dramatically different from anything found in typical surface ecosystems. And researchers believe studying organisms like these could offer genuine clues about whether life might survive in similarly isolated, ice-covered oceans elsewhere in our solar system, including the hidden liquid ocean scientists suspect lies beneath the icy crust of Saturn's moon Enceladus, kept warm according to leading theories, by heat rising from hydrothermal vents deep beneath that moon's frozen surface. From a steel sphere descending into total blackness at the bottom of the Pacific, to an isolated island tribe still defending its shores with bows and arrows, to a Soviet drill that dug 7.5 miles into solid rock and found fossils older than complex life itself, Earth still holds more mystery within its own boundaries than most of us ever stopped to consider. We've mapped the surface of the moon and Mars in remarkable detail, yet the majority of our own ocean floor and everything living quietly beneath our own feet remains almost entirely unexplored. If this journey through Earth's most extreme and least understood places genuinely fascinated you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss what we explore next, and let me know down in the comments which one of these deep, dark corners of our planet surprised you the most.